If you could think whatever you want into reality, what would you think about? Notice I didn't say do, but think, because I believe our thoughts control our actions. They bring about results. And if you have been listening to Create a Generational Love Cycle, I've been talking about on Fridays how my mother's words of wisdom, her sharing her painful, often painful and embarrassing moments in life, and some good things, laughter, but sharing those, how I derived spiritual principles from her experiences. And I use them to build my inner and outer foundation, this inner garden that we have, sowing seeds. And as a result of those seeds, they produced fruit that I would see in my life of praying, asking for things, and them coming to fruition, asking for the family that I now have, the curly head boy and girl, the husband, mate that is less than 5 years older than me, with brown green eyes, because I saw a love story where she had asked for specific characteristics in a mate, and it was his eye color. And I said, I'm going to try that. I was sitting in my room on my blue and white carpeted floor in Venice, Illinois. And I said, I'm going to test the universe too. And I've seen throughout my life where I've gotten jobs, positions where I wasn't the most qualified for it, and being honest with myself, where I have received input from asking while I was driving if somebody was right for me. And the next thing you knew, I turned on my car radio and heard that this person was in trouble for doing something where he told me he was going. And it as a child, I would just ask for things, and I would just sit back and watch as they came to fruition, as I would experience them. And I remember getting down on my knees and just praying that not don't let another day go by that I don't say thank you. That gratitude became a way of, it was my two-way fence of keeping the good stuff in, and not allowing the bad stuff to come in to infiltrate me. And it's until that I started complaining and start seeing myself in my 30s primarily as a victim. My life had changed. I had undergone some things that I wasn't used to, and I saw myself as a victim. And it was my mother's words that allowed me to take my rightful place on earth, to realize that I am not a victim. I am victorious. And the reason why we are all victorious is because we have the infinite power, intelligence, God, whatever you may call it. It's what you believe in that it is really about. But that we all have this infinite intelligence inside of us, this internal garden of spiritual seeds, this sanctuary that we can turn to, we can share our thoughts, we can share our beliefs, we can grow beliefs, we can change our life with this internal promise that we have, the laws of love that guide us to acceptance, to understanding, having compassion, being hopeful that no matter what you go through, that there is an opportunity for you to create your your environment from the inside out. And it is a source of freedom in which these principles have have allowed me. And I believe that's what life is being free to express ourselves as we naturally are, being made in the image of our creator. And it's a wonderful thing when you come to the realization that you are not alone, that no experiences define you. And it is a daily process because, as we go through life, that we experience things, but we're hopeful, at least I'm hopeful, and I hope that you too will be hopeful, that you will take on the attitude, the mindset, the thought process, the principles, the beliefs, that you are greater than your experiences. And that's what I've been talking about on Heal from the Inside Out, because it's all about, as a generational love cycle, and changing the thoughts that created the cycle of pain, the things that we are experiencing in life. Because individual consciousness, or individual awareness consciousness, affects collective consciousness. This huge garden that we all have our individual sections or parts in it, where our thoughts have, and our actions and how we feel and how we behave, affect others on a direct and often an indirect level or impact. And so what I am saying is nothing new. When you think about Louise Hay and you can heal your life, and the realization that our mental state, our thoughts, can impact our health, both negatively and physically. And I remember I purchased her book in my 20s, because that's when I started building my collection of books after moving out of my mother's place and getting my job as a registered nurse. Then, when I was practicing in St. Louis, Missouri, and building my library of great teachers, people that I believed were uh, somewhat aligned with the truth, right? And those consisted of Louise Hay, Gary Zukav, and Seed of the Soul, and I still have their books today. Eckhart Tolle, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct, and I do apologize if I'm not. Even watching Oprah Winfrey and her stories and her spiritual transition when she was on her Oprah show, from one place to another place of really trying to help people to become the highest version of themselves. Reading Dr. Miles Monroe and understanding the kingdom of God with my family, and being and learning about that through my husband, and him being told about that when we were in living in Ohio. And Dr. Wayne Dyer, really uh, paying attention to his words, even though I started reading him, but really during my parenting season. Also to Earl Nightingale and Catherine Ponder and Florence Scovel Shinn, and talking about intuition, the magic of intuition, and that little book that is so powerful and opening the door to, we are again greater than our circumstances, and how the power of prayer and how the power of thought can really bring about a change in not only how we think and what we believe and how we act, but also too in what we bring forth in our life. And just recently looking at Jennifer Hudson and receiving an award, and how bringing her son and them there to that, and the power of the law of attraction, coming from Chicago, and now doing such great things with her life, and being awarded for that. Um, William Shakespeare, and his thoughts about our thoughts, and whatever you believe, it is so. And just hearing quotes like that from all of these leaders, and then some, and recently Dr. Joseph Murphy, and the cosmic power that is in you, and just the power of thought, and being hopeful, and hearing stories of other people's lives on healing, and changing their circumstances because they changed how they began to think about it. It's confirmation, because it was during a child, and going through some adverse circumstances, what the world will label adverse. For me, it was just experiences, that going through not having my biological father in a home, having the misuse of my body, And just growing up in the circumstances that I did, and realizing that I needed something greater than myself. I needed to connect with this presence that I knew loved me and I believe loved me. This presence that spoke to me when I was living in Memphis, Tennessee, with my elder brother and my mother and my father, and hearing that still matter of fact voice when I was under 5 years old. Because when I moved to Illinois that year, I did turn five. So I was about 3 or 4, and being slowly introduced to this presence that I now know resides in me, realizing that I needed to be a student of life and not change the word learn mistakes to learn life lessons, and realizing that life is an opportunity for us to build character. Now I know to express the divine within, because that's what we're here for, is to express this creator of all things in us, and it chose us in different forms human forms, but yet still giving us this power of creation to create our life as we see fit. And we're constantly doing it over and over and over again. And we often can be unconscious of that. And it's about coming to a conscious knowing. I can see my evolution, spiritual evolution, I believe that we're here for, is that alignment with our spirit, the human form of us, human genetic form, and aligning it with our spiritual form, with these seeds of divine that are in us, these spiritual fruits that we're here to display on earth in so many different forms, in so many different ways: writing, speaking, teaching, building, construction, dancing, all of that nature, that we have access to everything. And it's that little part that we play in our lives, in the lives of those, our family, in the lives of our friends and associates, in the lives of our businesses, in the lives of just worldly, wherever our gifts may take us. And it is these principles that will help guide us, that will help be the light through the dark valleys, that will help us to ground our feet as we go up these mountains of love and forgiveness and compassion, because we're having to display those with everything that is going on in the world. But it's through our individual thoughts that we can change what is going on in the world, one step at a time and one person at a time. And today I am talking about my mother's principle of, just because it happened to someone else doesn't mean it happened to you. And I thought how powerful that life lesson that my mother shared, that I derived this spiritual principle, this spiritual truth, that we don't have to go through what we see others go through. And unfortunately, we have so many that are going through situation and experiences out of guilt, that you're in pain, I'm sad for you, I want to be close to you. And we feel this connection that if we have the disease, and it could be unconscious as well as conscious, if we have the disease or illness, if we put ourselves in your shoes, we remain tied to you. We remain that though I may hurt, I am still bounded to you. You are still my grandmother. We're sharing something similar. And I know it sounds probably cruel, but it also is, I believe, something that is happening in this world that we often feel, because if I don't go through what you went through, that is in essence a betrayal. That often we can hear parents say, well, so what if that person is going through it? I went through it even worse. They have to go through what I go through too. And it happens on both sides of the fence. But we have to realize, I know that that principle, one of the things about it is that, even though I was thinking how powerful that principle is, powerful in that it can be used for good as well as evil. That we can say, but just because you got rich or you having a wealthy life doesn't mean I have to. Just as quickly as we can say, just because you have this disease or illness doesn't mean that I have to too as well. So we have to decide what it is and how these principles that we're going to live by, and how our beliefs, and how we are going to um, use them to have the life that we desire. So when I ask that question, if you could think of yourself, whatever thought you can think of or whatever you want to think of, and despite any experiences that you had, what would you think of? Would you think of yourself ill? Would you think of yourself in pain every day? Would you think of yourself anxious every day? Would you think of yourself being anxiety? Is that how you want to really live your life? And that was the one of the convictions that I had as a child, and to I reclaimed it as an adult, is that just because someone did something to me or didn't do something or didn't say something or said something doesn't mean I have to punish myself. Because when you think about love, love seeks to be harmonious. It seeks unity. It sees health. It syncs with peace and joy and happiness and freedom. And when you think about being anxious, because I've had that state when I felt like I was a victim of my circumstance. When you think about panic attacks, when you think and I experienced it, didn't even know I was having it. I was wondering what's going on, and I was actually having panic attacks. Sitting down, my heart rate was going up. And when you think about those things, is that actually freedom? Or is it bondage? I mean, we talk about slavery, we talk about being imprisoned, we talk about even being in prison with what happened with history, and we talk about being in prison even with jobs and in relationships. And when you think about relationships, the relationship, and I talked about this, so you can go back in December of this past year, December 2025. Our relationships start with initially with who we believe created us. Then we look at our relationship with ourselves. And so if you believe that if you're treating yourself negatively, if you're looking forward to negative expectations, that is a form of bondage. If you believe that you should be ill, that should be sick, that you should be anxious, depressed, and you start taking on this identity, I am anxious, I am depressed, I am sick, I am uh, diabetes, I am colon cancer, I am. If you've taken on that identity, remember any label that you fix towards something will eventually act as such. And so when you say that just because you went through it doesn't mean I have to, you are disconnecting from that label. You are rejecting that thought. And when you reject a negative thought, the opposite of it is positive. The opposite of free of imprisonment is freedom. And we are here to show that there is no imprisonment, that we don't have to live our lives. And what I thought as a child, there's no way that God created us, that I knew God is what my mom used, so that's what I was socialized to believe, that God created us to struggle with our life, to not present our gifts in a way that uplifts and benefits other. I saw people, that even one person that misused my body, and so gifted, so talented. I thought, oh my gosh, but yet still so lost, had forgotten who he was, had forgotten who he was and what he was here to do. And often we can allow experiences that we consider are painful because we have to label it to be painful. There are things that I've gone through that I didn't attach a label to it. So if you don't attach a label to it, all those definitions don't flow with it. That it was just an experience. Like when I stubbed my toe, or I can either say, darn it, you're stupid, why did you do something like that? Or, oh wow, that was kind of painful. Let me learn from that and I'm going to move on. That even when I was experiencing what I was as a child, as far as the misuse, I didn't even call it what people call it today. I didn't call it sexual abuse. I didn't learn until I was in my 20s about the statistics of people that have been sexually abused, as far as not going to school and dropping out, teenage pregnancy, and all those other things, drug use that came with it. I love school because I figured out I could learn. One of the first things I learned was the ideal of personal space and how I have the right to that personal space. And so it's about what you choose to allow this experience to be. And ultimately it comes down to, if you think about the create a generational love cycle, you think about breaking the cycle of pain. I didn't label it breaking the cycle of pain because, like Mother Teresa, I'm not going to focus on um, um, against war. I'm going to focus on pro peace. I'm going to focus on what it is that I want, because that's what the law of attraction about. That is what the law of growth is about, is that we focus on what we want out of life instead of what we don't want. And you're hearing me now as I plug in my laptop because it's about it's about to go. The battery was drawn out. But when you think about this whole situation, this whole scenario of thought, and I listed all those people um, that have contributed to the power of thought, a new thought movement, um, is that we have the power of choice. That no matter what it is that we go through, we can choose. You think about Nelson Mandela and being imprisoned, and how his choice could have been a whole lot different coming out of prison. There's a side that you could just go and settle in some home and be bitter for the rest of your life and just choose to see everybody as evil and bitter, instead of choosing to make a difference, choosing to show what compassion looks like, choosing to show what forgiveness looks like, choosing to show what the power of thought looks like. Though you slayed me, where are you going to keep your eyes? You're going to keep your eyes on the possibilities. You're going to keep your eyes on the ultimate presence that loves you, that if he is for you, who can be against you? That we are here to have life more abundantly, that God brought us here to prosper us through our gifts, our talents, our abilities, utilizing our experiences. 'Cause everything we go through is all about this purpose that we are here, this divine purpose. And we are to see it as such. And that's how we decide that we're going to change this. We're going to change this whole outcome. We're going to speak up for children. We're going to be the voice that many people feel like their voice was taken. We're going to change our thoughts and be hopeful. We're going to be compassionate. We're going to be loving. We're going to allow our light to shine in darkness, even if we are the small light, even though we may feel attack in the dark shadows. Thy rod and thy staff will comfort us, that knowing of this infinite power, this divine presence, this source of life is inside of us. So when we think about the power of choice, we have to look at things like, if someone else is not experiencing a fear to a threat, perceived threat, then what is the difference in the other person who is experiencing it? When you think of that, you think of power of thought. You think about belief. You think about the power of choice. Because where is the difference between someone who looks very good, young, old, versus someone who's an old? It is the power of thought. What are their thoughts about growing old? Gray hair, wrinkles, versus someone who has a childlike face. When you think about illness and sickness, what is their thought about sickness? There are times where I said, I can't afford to be sick, and the symptoms went away. What about businesses prospering? This is what I'm working on. How I can put out, because I've never really had a business before, no one to show me. And many other people, Brendan Burchard talked about that, many others, well, we had no one to show us. But we can either hold on to the thought that I am success, I am born to win, and continue to move forward in that idea, continue to move forward in that thought that we have, that we are here to accomplish great things. Or we can just not and decide that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to settle for whatever I have, and this is all I'm going to do, and forget about my gifts and talents. They're only hobbies. It is the power of thought. When we think about our lifestyle, and we think about poverty, and we think about wealth, what is it? Traditionally, it has been the power of thought, that you group of people belong here. When we think about our weight, and we think about underweight and overweight, when we think about food, When we think about how someone could smoke for years, I don't know everything about George Barnes. I think it's George Burns, but it's the actor that played God, the devil in God. And I didn't look it up because I tell you, I sometimes I take notes, sometimes I don't. I just get on here and start talking. But when you think about him, and I believe he smoked cigars until he passed, and I think he passed at 100 years old. When you think about lung cancer and you think about how we're saying, okay, these foods are what's causing this, but some people can eat those foods and live to be in their 90s. When you think about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and the diet that they had and the foods that they were eating, animals, etc. When you think about people that during COVID were in the healthiest form and yet still they passed on, succumbed to the disease. What is at the center of this? What do we find that is consistent? And what we'll find, and I'm very privy to the research that will happen, but I believe what is there is the power of thought. What we believe we deserve, what we believe life is, what we believe we are, what we believe we can do. And so, one of the things that I wrote about in my manuscript, Compass, Out of the Darkness into the Wonderful Light, is that the chapter 2, and we're talking about action, is that you have to, if you can't physically separate from someone, then you have to do it mentally. And before you know it, with the mental separation, there becomes a physical separation. You have to mentally separate yourself from that person and realize that you don't have to do the same things that they did. There can become a conviction that no one should ever experience what I experienced, and that I should never force myself on another. The other thing is I have down written, I did write these down, is that do not establish a link. Do not, how do you say it, play with or entertain a link that because they went through this, I have to go through it. That know that your life is different. Your biochemical makeup is different. Your mind can be different by the thoughts you accept and reject. And that you are different. You have this spirit, the one spirit, but you are different. If you are now even thinking of that, I have to go through this, try practicing, try an experiment. I used to do it a lot. Experiment with, if I change my thought about this situation to that I don't have to, that's one of the things I talk about. I don't have to. I don't have to be sick. I don't have to be ill. If you meditate on that instead of illness and sickness and expecting pain and frustration, what will that do? Will that alleviate some of what you're going through? Will it even cure you? That's the question. And then, most importantly, learn from the experience. What can you take from that experience to the next? And Jumanji, I think what was about that is that, I believe that every experience feeds on the next. One, when you're going through a game and you collect all this stuff, like Jumanji was this game movie, and you collect all this stuff and you realize that you can use it in the future. Well, that's how our experiences are. They elicit treasures from us that we learn something. And majority of the time, if not 100% of the time, it's about us. It's not about the other person. It's about us. It's how we reacted, what thoughts we had about a situation, and how do we use those thoughts? How do we allow them to direct us? So, just in talking about just because someone goes through something doesn't mean that you have to. And understanding that we all have the power of choice. And many great leaders have talked about it, many great books. I could go on and list them, The Course of Miracles. And often we're afraid of letting go. We're afraid of coming from our power. Because what does that mean? We have to forgive. We have to understand. We cannot have excuses in our lives because we are more than what we think we are. And then all we have to do is give ourselves an opportunity to express ourselves, to remove those weeds, negative emotions, and to embrace the spiritual seeds of joy and forgiveness and gentleness, and all of those spiritual seeds that we have inside of us that are just waiting to be expressed, that are waiting for nurturing and to bring forth a harvest that will help you to enjoy life and the fruits of your labor. So this is Timika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. I know this one is a little bit longer. I don't even know how long I'm gonna go. I usually try to make it less than 30 minutes, but I hope this has been beneficial for you, and that if it has, and you feel that someone else could benefit from this, please share this episode and this podcast, because it's all about breaking the cycle of pain by creating a generational love cycle, one that we deserve, one that we have the right to, and one that we are fully capable of being and expressing this lifetime. I'll talk to you soon.